Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, October 7th, 2020, and today I'm going to be getting the Republican Party to a supermajority in the United States Senate. Now, a supermajority, I guess by my standards, would be 60-40. We're never going to see them reach 67, and realistically, that just isn't possible in any type of scenario. Now, this is not realistically possible either, but it's a little bit more likely than a 67-seat majority for the GOP. Now, this map is going to be very weird. Again, this is not a prediction. This is just essentially me taking the most conservative states and then going into the more liberal ones that are still a little bit competitive and then moving them towards the Republican Party. Now, I did make a video about this for the Democratic Party. It was uploaded, I think, 2 days ago. So you can go ahead and check that out if you'd like. But today's video is going to be just about getting the Republicans to 60. Now, this scenario is not easy. It was actually a little bit more difficult than this Democratic one, and that's actually pretty surprising because if we applied, actually really quickly, let's just do this. If we applied the 2016 presidential election results to this map, we would see the Republicans take away 52 seats. Now, 53 seats. Now, obviously, that's where they stand today, but there are still some mildly competitive races. I mean, if we went through the ones that are still at least remotely competitive. We have Colorado where there's a Republican incumbent, and there's some number of other states that traditionally would be competitive states but aren't so much this time around. So we are going to be working with margins. We're going to worry about who's doing well in which specific state. And all in all, I mean, we are going to see some of these states be shifted to the right. Obviously, that's how this is going to work. But because of the fact that we're seeing a number of Democratic states shift to the right, traditionally conservative states that I may normally characterize as lean, that are competitive this time, are going to shift likely, sometimes even safe. So on your screen right now are the safe states for the Republican Party. That puts them at 41. Yes, Kentucky is considered safe. I'm moving Mississippi over into the safe column as well. That puts Republicans at 41, 24 toss-up races. Now, for the Democrats, we'll actually get to adding a few seats along the way. They can only win 5 out of the remaining 24, at least for the sake of this prediction. It's going to be a little bit difficult picking which Democratic state. I already know which one it's going to be, but there's a reason for that. We'll get to that in just a moment. But let's talk about some of these more competitive but right-leaning states. So Texas right now is still leaning towards the right. We're probably going to see John Cornyn win there by a likely margin. That probably isn't going to change. For Alabama, I'm going to consider this a likely Republican state as well. I'm not going to move it over into the safe column. I'm thinking 13-14% for Tommy Tuberville. Doug Jones still remains mildly popular as a Democrat in the South. Plus, also, it's already expected to go to the Republicans. This isn't changing too much in terms of the balance of power, just the margin. Taking a look at some other states, Kansas would move over into the likely Republican column. I actually have it as likely as it stands today, but obviously it would have to remain with that characterization. I mean, Roger Marshall isn't exactly the strongest candidate. He's probably not going to win it by a safe margin, but he's still expected to win it by a likely margin, and I'm going to keep it as likely for the sake of this prediction. Now, for Georgia's Senate special election, I'm going to characterize this one safe because obviously if we're working in a scenario where the Republican Party is getting 60, I'd assume that they would have 2 Republicans in the runoff, meaning this would be a safe Republican state, regardless of who wins it. And for the Georgia regular election, I'd actually have to move this one over into the likely Republican column as well. I think South Carolina and Alaska should all join the Republican column as likely are states. I don't think that's too shocking. All of these states that I've characterized so far are expected to go to the GOP, which is why it's so competitive. Now, if we take a look at Montana, this is another state where the GOP is the current favorite to win. I'd guess in this scenario, it would move over into the likely Republican column as well, which puts them at 49. Now, for the GOP, they need more than 50. Obviously, we're working in a scenario where they're getting 60, but they need more than 50 because of the fact that Joe Biden is likely to win the presidency. Now, if Donald Trump wins, they could be fine at 50. They would still retain the majority, and Vice President Mike Pence would likely break the tie, but at the end of the day, there's still going to be possibly some Republican defects, and they'd still like to be over 50, especially if Biden wins, because then they would be in control, and they could block potential legislation to be passed under the Biden administration. So the Republicans are at 49 right now. I guess the next go-to state would actually be North Carolina, where we've seen a scandal develop with the Democratic candidate. Now, Tom Tillis was just a traditionally very poor candidate. I mean, he has never led once throughout the entire election cycle. And he actually isn't leading right now. He's coming closer. The margin is expected to narrow up. We're seeing a 3-4 point margin where we used to see 6 to 7 for Cal Cunningham. But at the same time, people have already cast their ballots. We're going to see a lot of influx before Election Day of mail-in ballots. So people still have some time to make their decision. But also, we're probably not going to see a blowout margin even with this scandal unfolding for Cal Cunningham, even in this scenario. I mean, Tom Tillis is just a relatively unknown in his own state, he's not too popular. And Cal Cunningham, well, on paper doesn't seem like the strongest candidate, and obviously with this scandal, obviously not, but also he's resonating with these voters somehow and doing very well. So the Republicans are at 50. Where does the next Republican state come from? Well, I'd actually say Iowa. I mean, Iowa's expected to go to the GOP. I should have gone Iowa before North Carolina, but both of them end up with the same result. Joni Ernst could probably still win this race. I mean, she's the favorite to win it based off the 538 forecast, but she's been dwindling. I mean, she started off this race with a very strong advantage over Teresa Greenfield. I mean, she had a very strong election back in 2014. Her ads, I mean, everything about her campaign was very strong. And now she's facing one of the toughest re-election bids of her lifetime. I mean, her only re-election bid, but still very, very close. In this state, what they showed us in 2018 was that they were willing to elect 3 Democrats to the House where they previously only had 1. So Iowa, very different type of state. Went solidly for Donald Trump in 2016. Then 2018 rolls around and they vote for the Democrats. Very weird dynamic. But honestly, Joni Ernst obviously would have to carry it in order for this scenario to take hold. So 14 toss-up races. I haven't characterized any Democratic state. That's why we still see 14. I can actually characterize 2 of them right now just so we can add up some Democratic numbers. I would say that New Jersey and Delaware are the states we can add to the Democratic column. That puts them at 37. Now let's talk about some more Republican states. So in order for this scenario to take hold, they would have to flip the state of Michigan. Michigan would probably be more likely than Arizona and even Colorado. Michigan is a state where John James is running. He's not the favorite by any means. He's still competitive, but he's probably going to lose. Obviously, in this scenario, he would have to win. It would be a flip for the GOP. In fact, I believe this is the only flip we've seen so far. So that puts the Republicans, actually no, Alabama is another flip. Michigan is yet again another flip. Now, Arizona and Colorado would have to move over into the Republican column. And I honestly think, Arizona is such a long stretch. After that debate, I mean, there's no way I really see Martha McSally coming back from her already 9-10 point deficit. But obviously in this scenario, she would have to do well. Now, Cory Gardner, however, has a little bit of leeway. He's expected to lose by 5-6%. Much better than Martha McSally. But at the same time, he's still in a traditionally Democratic state, voted for Hillary Clinton, voted for Obama. The last time it went to a Democrat was George W. Bush. And while Donald Trump came within 5% of winning the state in 2016, he's nowhere near this time around. So it would have to be, this scenario would have to coincide with a Trump re-election where Trump is doing very well nationwide, but Colorado, it's still a stretch putting it in the GOP column. But I'd say in this scenario, it would go by a lean margin for Cory Gardner. As for Arizona, I'm saying tilt at most for Martha McSally, especially after that debate performance. So the Republicans are at 54. I forgot the state of Maine for whatever reason. Maine would go to Susan Collins. Now, Sarah Gideon and her are in a very, very close race. Very close race. In fact, it's expected to be the closest Democratic state of the election cycle. The closest. So when we take a look at Maine, it's a very interesting dynamic. They love sending independents to the Senate. I mean, they have an independent senator who does caucus with the Democrats, but got a lot of the vote in 2018. 2020 rolls around. Susan Collins, who has served for 24 years, has the name recognition of being bipartisan. Pretty much everything tied to her, I guess, used to scream bipartisanship until the Kavanaugh vote. And that's one thing that the Democratic Party really never forgave her for. And they're not letting her forget it this time around. And also the fact that she votes with Donald Trump a lot of the time seems to be a major playing point up in Maine. She would have to win this re-election bid in order for this scenario to work out. She's not the favorite to win it right now, but it's not too far of a stretch to say she could win her re-election bid by any means. So that puts the Republicans at 55, the Democrats at 37. Let's add one more Democratic state, and that is the state of Massachusetts. That is not surprising whatsoever. Though there was a competitive Democratic primary, it is not remotely competitive. Now, in this scenario, we would have to see Minnesota flip to the Democratic Party. Now, Tina Smith is a very strong candidate. I actually have it rated as safe for the Democratic Party, but if I was to peel away from some of these safe Democratic states, I'd say Minnesota would probably be the first to go. The next to go would actually be the state of New Mexico. Now, New Mexico has an open state. It has an open seat, which means that there is no incumbent running. Ben Ray Lujan is the favorite, but he's expected to win by 14-15%. In Maine, Tina Smith might actually outperform that, and then in New Hampshire, we see Jeanne Shaheen doing wickedly better, and in Virginia for Mark Warner. So Minnesota, actually maybe New Mexico, Minnesota, then New Mexico, and then we move over into the state of New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire, for whatever reason, the New Hampshire GOP and just the national GOP did not field a good candidate in this race. I mean, this is an embarrassing statement for the Republican Party to not even be remotely competitive. Jeanne Shaheen had a competitive race before. Now she's on track to easily win this re-election bid. And we're looking at New Hampshire. I mean, it's a traditionally swing state. I mean, this state's 4 electoral votes decided the 2000 election. Had it gone to Al Gore, he would have been president. And it went to George W. Bush. And, you know, this state typically votes with a presidential election winner. It did vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 by 2,000 votes. 2,000 votes. And the Republican Party did not target this Senate seat. The Democratic Party really has nowhere that they need to vehemently defend. Maybe Michigan and Alabama. Other than that, everything they're doing is on the offense. They have so many competitive races. Look at all the likely Republican states. Every single one of these is held by a Republican currently, except for Alabama. Look at all of the lean Republican seats. Every single one of these is held by a Republican right now, except for Michigan. So when you think about that, the GOP is at a very big disadvantage, despite entering into this map with a very strong advantage. But obviously, that's not what this scenario is about. We have the Republicans at 58. Obviously, the next one to go would be Virginia, but it gets a little bit trickier from here. Because the Republican Party has locked down Rhode Island, and they have very strong bases in Illinois and Oregon. But if this scenario was to happen, I mean, this was very hard to call. I mean, I was going back and forth between Oregon and Illinois. I'm going to stick with 538 on this one, and we're going to go over to the state of Oregon and take a look at this. Less than 1% chance that Jo Rae Perkins wins, and I believe she's a QAnon believer, but that's besides the point, where she receives 49.7% of the vote, and Jeff Merkley receives 48.4% of the vote. And that's where the 60th seat would come from. Insanely unlikely, by no means possible, but also, I made this scenario, I have to find a way for it to happen, and Oregon is the least Democratic out of Illinois, New Jersey, Delaware, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. In fact, Oregon is expected to be likely on the presidential level, so keep that in mind. So the final map, 60 seats for the Republicans. Where are they getting their flips from? From the West Coast to the East Coast, Oregon, New Mexico, Minnesota, Michigan, Alabama, Virginia, New Hampshire, and I believe that's it. That's where all the pickups are for the GOP from the Democratic Party. They already started off with 53. All they really needed is 7 to get to 60. Now, again, if you're skipping to the end of the video, this is not a prediction. This is not realistic whatsoever. This is just a scenario I formulated, and I'm getting here somehow. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.